Welcome to the telling of today's story. The story today is called Seaku. This is an ancient tale told by the Alsea people who lived here on the Central Oregon coast for time out of mind. Centuries, perhaps millennia. This is a story of Seaku and the sea lion people. I tell this story with the permission of the elders of the Confederated Tribe of the Siletz. This is how it was. There was a time when Seaku was swimming in the ocean, doing what he liked to do the best, eating salmon. There were many salmon in the ocean, and Seaku was glad for this. And Seaku was swimming along the beach, swimming in the ocean, when he came to a place where a small river emptied into the ocean. A small river, a river we now call the Yahats River. And Seaku noticed that the salmon were turning out of the ocean and swimming up that river in great numbers. So Seaku thought, if I were to change myself into a bear, I could follow the salmon up that river. And so it was. He transformed himself into a bear. And he came out of the ocean and he walked along that river. And he walked along watching the salmon as they swam upriver. And he walked along until he came to the place where that river came out of a rock and emptied into a pool below. And Seaku saw that that pool would make a fine salmon weir or a salmon trap. And that if Seaku made a weir there, he would always have salmon to eat. So it was that Seaku felled a tree across the bottom of the pool. And just as he had hoped, the salmon came into the pool and they could not go out. And all he had to do when he was hungry was dip in a paw and life was good for Seaku. However, time went along, and there came a time when Seaku noticed that not as many salmon were swimming into his pool. And then Seaku noticed that a time came when no salmon were swimming into his pool. And this worried him. He needed salmon to live. And so Seaku decided he would find out what was happening to his salmon. And Seaku walked back down that Yahats River. He walked back down that little river until he came to the place where it emptied into the ocean. There should have been many salmon there. There were none. So Seaku turned to the north, from whence the salmon came, and he walked along the beach, looking into the ocean. No salmon were there. And he came to that place where another river emptied into the ocean, what we call the Alsea River. And there were no salmon swimming up that river. There should have been. So Seaku forded that river and continued walking along the beach until he came to a place where there were many rocks off the beach, that place we now call Seal Rocks. And when Seaku looked at those rocks, he saw why there were no salmon coming up his river. Those rocks were covered by sea lion people. And you know what those sea lion people were eating? Salmon, as hard and fast as they could. They were eating so many salmon, there were none to swim south. Oh, Seaku was so angry at those sea lion people. They were eating his salmon. And he took his great feet and he stomped and he stomped and he stomped on the tops of those rocks, frightening the sea lion people so that they fled. And when Seaku looked at the rocks, they were now a place where you could see his footprints because he had smashed them down. If you were to look at those rocks at Seal Rocks to this day, you will see the footprints of Seaku. The Seaku looked into the ocean, hoping the salmon were back, but they weren't. There still were no salmon in the river, in the ocean. And so it was that Seaku continued walking north and along the beach until he came to that place where another river emptied into the ocean, the Yaquina River. There were no salmon in the Yaquina River either. And so Seaku, he forded the river and he continued walking along the beach until he came to that place where the mountain came right down to the ocean. That place we now call Yaquina Head. And on the rocks at the bottom of Yaquina Head, Seaku saw that they were covered with sea lion people. And all of those sea lion people were eating salmon. Oh, Seaku was so angry. But he wanted to get rid of those sea lion people for good. What could he do? And he looked up at the top of that mountain. Ah, yes, he thought. And he climbed up to the top. And then he took his great paws and he dug them deep into the earth where the dark rock was. And he grabbed handfuls of that rock and squeezed it with his great paws until those rocks became round like balls. And then he took those rocks and he flung them into the ocean so hard and so fast it was as if the sea were boiling with a fire underneath it. And the sea lion people were frightened. They all fled in many directions. And when Seaku came down off of Yaquina Head and he saw that the rocks were free of the sea lion people, he was glad. And he looked into the ocean and he could see the salmon starting to swim south again. And the beach there at the bottom of Yaquina Head was covered with the round black rocks he had flung from the top. To this very day, if you go to Yaquina Head and walk down to the beach, you will find it covered with those round black rocks still. Seaku turned and walked south. And he came to the Yaquina River. It was full of salmon again. And he walked south. And when he came to the Alsea River, it was full of salmon again. And he walked south. And when he came to the Yahats River, it too was full of salmon. So Seaku walked to the very top of that river where it fell out of the rock and filled the pool below. And he lay down beside that pool and he reached into the water and pulled out a salmon and ate it. And Seaku was glad. And thus it was so.